So here we are again. Like I mentioned to you guys in my last video, prepping the white car for E85. So I'm going to be replacing these FIC 1050cc injectors for some FIC 2150s. Figured I'd show you guys the way I'm going about doing the install. So your guys' injector clips on a 2G will look like this. 1Gs have a different style clip, but still the same concept. The color wires doesn't really matter much as far as to how you wire them in to the FIC pigtails. From my understanding, these act like a solenoid, so it doesn't matter which way you switch it, because it's something about, you know, the wiring that you're able to just basically wire it in either color to either red or black. It doesn't really matter. It'll still work. But the thing you do have to label is each injector. So like here I have it labeled 3, and then I don't know if you guys can see, but in permanent marker I have another 3 labeled right there. This is just so you don't get your injector order messed up. That is a key thing as far as to making sure everything is properly set up and running right. You don't want no issues like that. So label them. I labeled it like this up top and on bottom. The reason I did it up top was when I did a wire tuck in the past, so that you can't see any of my wiring harness. I didn't plan on, you know, clipping them, and you know, this is a pretty good alternative, hard wiring them in. The adapter clips are like 60-70 bucks if I'm not mistaken, but this works just as good. You do need a solder, so I have my soldering iron right there. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward process. You pull them out, you clip the old one. So this is the wires that I have, and you know, this is the stock plug. So yeah, you basically, you know, take these out, strip it out, make good contact, and then you solder them. So I'll show you guys. This is kind of like phase 1. I'm gonna get my soldering iron, and then I will show you guys when they are connected. So one little technique I do want to mention when you're doing soldering, this is something I do. I like to interlock the actual wires together. So if you can see here, I have them kind of spread out and then kind of like forced into one another through the center. So this just kind of makes for a little bit stronger connection when you're soldering. A lot of people have different styles of doing it. This is the way that I'm doing it. I feel like it gives me a little bit of a stronger connection and a lot more durable. So yeah, show you guys once it's fully soldered. One more thing that I did forget to mention, when you guys are doing soldering like this, you do also, it's recommended to use some heat shrink. So this one here is, I think it is 532. It's Harbor Freight. I've used it in the past, works really well. But you guys can see. So what you do is, after you solder it, you want to have sufficient room to be able to get this heat shrinked. So I'm actually going to have to take this apart, but this needs to go in here, and then once you solder it up, you cover it, put this over the solder, heat it up with like a either like a heat gun. You could use a lighter. I don't really recommend it when you're dealing with, you know, possible fuel area, but you can. Just be very careful, make sure there's no fuel obviously around there. You don't want to, you know, catch fire. But what this does is it insulates the solder and the wires, so no water gets in there, and it just basically gives you a lot better connection and just overall longevity of your soldering and your wiring. So just a little tip, Harbor Freight, these are already pre-cut to pretty close to the size you need for it. You can pick it up in an assortment pack that has a lot of different ones. I'm sure there are better heat shrink out there. I mean, I'm not telling you go and buy Harbor Freight, but this has worked for me. I've soldered a few different things, you know, electronically for the gauges and stuff, and it's worked really well for me. So yeah, I just figured I'd give you guys a little pointer on that. Just want to show you guys a little bit of how your guys' wiring should come out. I mean, again, it doesn't have to be exactly like mine, but soldered it in and then heat shrinked everything. So you just want to make sure that, you know, you got a good connection. What I like to do after I solder, I like to pull on them, you know, fairly firm, just to make sure, you know, that if when I'm unplugging injectors, you know, doing stuff like that, that if I pull on them, they're not gonna, you know, lose connection right away. So They're on there really good. My soldering isn't, I'm not a master solderer, but sometimes it can be a little bit rough to get some good solders in there, especially if you don't have a good solder gun. But I have the Harbor Freight one right here. Not the greatest, but it gets the job done for these smaller little things. I do plan on upgrading, but yeah, just wanted to show you guys kind of how it's going to look so far. So this is the injector clip for the FIC 2150s. Yeah, so I mean, what I did on this one is, so now that you guys have your guys' wires soldered in and heat shrink, you're going to be left with this FIC connector. So I'll just show you guys how simple it is to hook them in. And there you go. I'll show you guys once everything's done, but I mean, you guys kind of get the gist of it. Once you guys do this, solder them in, and you just kind of plug and play. I will be updating a video showing you guys how to remove injectors in case some of you guys aren't experienced enough with it. It's fairly straightforward. You got 3 12mm bolts there. I am running upgraded fuel line, but it's still the same process. So I will either make a new video just about that, or I will put that video there. So I'm going to try to show you guys as best as I can. Again, I don't have a tripod or anything like that, so I'm going to be showing you guys how to remove your fuel rail. So the first step you want to do is start loosening up these 3 12mm bolts. What I like to do is kind of go a little bit at a time, just to give it a chance to release a little bit of the pressure. If you guys are going to do this, I highly recommend you guys to unplug your battery, especially if you don't know how the harness has been messed with in the past by previous owner. It's just always best to be safe than sorry. I actually have a kind of like a kill switch on mine, so anytime I work on anything fuel related, I always just disconnect the battery, just because like I said, it's better to be safe than sorry. So as you guys can see now, it's fairly easy to take these off, and when you go to reapply these 12 mils, they don't go on there super tight. So a big thing that I see on a lot of DSMs that I've worked on is they over tighten these so much that you either end up stripping it or you break one of these bolts inside of the head, and then you're in for a lot of fun trying to take that off. So I just encourage you guys, when you tighten it down, always start from the center going out. So you always start with this one, then this one, then this one, and you just kind of want to apply even force as you're tying each of these down. But you always want to start from the center out. Same way if you're torquing ahead, you start from the center and then you go out. It's just a lot better that way. These are very brittle. These fuel rails, they crack very easy. So. So after you unplug this, I kind of always just like to hook it back here. If you have your factory throttle plate, you can just hook it in there. Just kind of helps make it easier. So again, mine might look a little bit different than yours. I obviously have 6-hand return and 6-hand feed for my fuel setup. Your stock lines are going to have 2 bolts here, they're 10mm, as well as 2 bolts here that are 10mm. If you're on the stock setup, you'll have a factory fuel pressure regulator that sits right here. It's 2 bolts and it bolts onto the rail. So what you'll do, you'll unplug these, you'll loosen up these 2 10mm here, and be very careful with the bottom one. It tends to fall off when it hits the timing cover. It's kind of hard to get a ratchet in there, but you can just short socket 1/4 inch, and just be very careful when you drop that 10mm. Take that off, unplug the regulator there. You will have some fuel kind of leak out. With my setup here, I literally just have to take off the 3 bolts that are holding it, and then I slowly just kind of wiggle them out. And you want to be careful and look out for these little spacers here. If they fall, you cannot reuse, not reuse, but you can't use metal washers as a replacement for this. The factory ones are going to be your best bet. If you try to use like aluminum style washers that go on bolts, chances are it's not going to tighten down the way it should. And you might either end up cracking it or you end up having some fuel leaks. So be very careful when you take these off. Anytime your rail comes up, chances are these are going to wobble off and fall. So my recommendation is the moment you start pulling your rail, kind of keep a close eye as to where these spacers are at. It'll just save you a headache as far as to losing them or having to replace them. I think if you replace them, I think eBay has these for like $5, you know. So anytime I go to the junkyard, I highly recommend you guys pick these up from the wrecking yard or pick and pull. They come in handy when you lose it. So if you always have extras, you never really have to worry about, you know, this setting you back from doing an install like I'm doing now. So then the rest of it's pretty straightforward. You want to take your injectors, kind of twist and pull. These are my FIC 1050cc injectors. I've been running these for a while now. They made, from what the virtual dyno was saying from my tuner Ted Spec, the first time it was right around 470 horsepower. So I know these were not maxed out at all, but very good injectors. They idle really well. I've been on pump gas for a long time. I'm now going to E85, but highly recommend the Fuel Injector Clinic injectors. They're amazing, especially these 1050s. Anything really over 1050, I've heard that you get into idling issues as far as running it on the DSM link and stuff like that. But I personally never ran into any issues at all running these 1050cc injectors. So what I like to do, take them off and then kind of set them up top. Try to keep them in order. I mean, you don't have to. I just like to, just because then I like to kind of inspect them and see if there was any issues there. And again, as you guys see, there is fuel coming out. I would highly recommend you guys have a rag down here. But again, all my electrical is disconnected, so I'm not concerned about it at all right now. But just for sake of cleanliness, put a rag under there. And yeah, just twist to the side and just gently pull. And like I said, sometimes these little things, you know, I like to hook them back here, but you can't control when it wants to pop off like that, you know. So again, just take them off. And sometimes these lower seals here, they kind of get stuck in there. All you got to do is just take a flathead, pull them out, or just use your nails. Very easy to take them out. And yeah, repeat the process for all four. This one's a little bit harder to take off. So when I put these seals on, again, this is just a little, you know, kind of trick of the trade. I like to double seal these. So I have the smaller seal on the bottom and the lightly bigger seal up on top. It makes for a good seal. And I mean, anytime I ever touch my injectors as far as taking them off, and you know, for sake of boost leaks, I always replace my seals. Highly recommend you to do so. Last thing you want to do is lose out on power from seals, you know. Super simple to replace them. Fairly cheap as well too, but that's just a little trick. Some people just run one. I like to run, you know, the lower, smaller black O-ring on the bottom, and then the kind of fatter green one up on top. Never had any boost leaks from my injectors. And that's pretty much it. I mean, the process to put it back is the exact opposite of what I just did. Again, very key tip is those little black spacers. There's going to be 3 of them there. Keep a close eye on them. They do tend to fall, so just giving you guys a heads up on that. And basically, you just, like I said, repeat the process. Plug in the injectors in here. Each one of these here is 4 injectors, 4 cylinders, obviously, and that is pretty much it. So hope this helps. I'll show you guys an updated video at the end. Maybe not on this video, but coming soon of me getting those injectors put in, and then I will be doing a video on installing the AEM 340 fuel pump for E85 compatibility. I should be getting tuned on E85 in the next coming week or two, if all goes well. So stay tuned for that. Yeah, keep boosting. Cool. Another little update I want to do while you're doing this install of the injectors. So you have what's called a resistor pack that's located, if I can show you guys, I mean, you guys probably, if you have an intake manifold that's aftermarket, it'll look like this. If you have a stock one, it's located against the firewall. You can see that it goes and it plugs in right here. So what you have to do when you're running high impedance injectors like the FIC 2150s is you have to plug that connector there. You can either use, you can cut into your factory one. They sell a plug that you could get. I think it's from like STM or Extreme PSI. Might be like 30, 40, maybe 50 bucks. I'm not sure. Another thing you could do is you cut your factory resistor pack harness. I actually happen to have pulled an extra one from the junkyard. So if you clip the harness from the actual resistor pack, I'll show you guys how that would look. Sorry, moving stuff around at the moment. But I mean, basically what it looks like, sorry about that. So this is a resistor pack that I got from the pick and pull. You clip this. So if you look at it, sorry, trying to get this done. It's pretty late. So this would go in there like that. So it's a full harness with the resistor pack. If you cut it here, and what you do is you're going to solder these wires together, and highly recommend that you heat shrink it. What I'm going to do is, solder them together and kind of have it folded a bit this way, just so that, when you go to heat shrink it, the wire's not sticking out, because then you don't want it to, go through the heat shrink. But this is a way to do a kind of like a homemade style plug. If not, like I said, if you have the money, by all means, go ahead, buy the plug and play plug adapter. If you're pretty decent at soldering, you don't need to be an expert. I'm far from an expert. It's really not that hard. Just give it a try. Saves you about 30-40 bucks. I mean, this resistor, I want to say I paid like $5-6 bucks at pick and pull, and make your own plug. Yeah, just wanted to make sure I let you guys know that. So anytime you're running high impedance injectors, you do have to plug up that factory resistor pack. What that resistor pack does is it sends, what 4 of these wires are, if I'm not mistaken, is for the 4 injectors, and that one white is a power wire that sends power to the factory injectors that are low impedance. When you're running high impedance, from my understanding, is this isn't necessary. So just figured I'd give you guys a little update on that in case you guys didn't know. I will be pulling the fuel rail in a bit, so stay tuned.